Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you may be watching this. I'm Jamie Moeller, and this is the Grad Connection, where my goal is to help graduate students thrive, not just survive. Last couple weeks, I've been talking about scripts, and it's kind of funny that when I started talking about scripts, I was really just going to talk about one, and then all of a sudden they became two and four, and now another week on scripts. It seems that I might be having a little trouble with confirmation bias. That is, everything I see is a script right now. But I'm going to continue to share these. Before I get into the content today, I just want to thank those who've reached out to me, subscribed, whether that be on YouTube or requested to join the Grad Connection private Facebook group, or connected to me on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever you might be getting this content. My original goal was just to create this material for graduate students, and I know that, at least I hope it's helping many of them, but I've also had a lot of other people that have commented where they've seen this clip or that clip, and it's an encouragement for me. It's not necessarily why I'm doing it, but at least it affirms for me that there is a demand for this content. And so my intent is to continue this. I started it as an experiment because I really didn't know whether anybody would listen to me. Although I have a modest number of subscribers on Facebook and YouTube, I will say LinkedIn kind of tells me that there are quite a few people that are looking at this. So hopefully you're finding it useful, and most importantly, I hope it just doesn't become head knowledge. I hope you figure out a way to integrate it into your life and put it into practice. I know a lot of these things, when we're talking about changing core behaviors and trying to improve ourselves, it can be challenging because first thing you have to do is recognize that a change is needed, and then in real time you have to figure out how to implement that change. So nevertheless, I would just encourage you to continue to reach out. Let me know if you're finding this useful. My intent is to continue it until people stop watching it or I quit having things to say. And I suspect the latter is not likely, so it'll basically be based upon people continuing to access the content. So scripts. We've talked about scripts. Because of the situations I'm in, and because I believe it's part of becoming more of a kind of a polished leader, polished executive, polished person, however you want to describe it. I think scripts are extremely helpful. We've talked about conflict communication script. We've talked about disagreeing agreeably. We talked about coaching questions. We've talked about last week inviting dialogue and response. And so today what I want to kind of talk about, and this again comes from my friend Tom Henschel, the Look and Sound of Leadership podcast. But nevertheless, this was a small piece of a larger session he did, and again, everything I seem to be hearing and seeing are scripts, and so this one was particularly relevant to me, relevant enough that I wrote it down, and it was actually the first time I'd heard it, but it really kind of has to do with what I would call the emotional hijack, right? So we all get ourselves into situations or find ourselves in situations where all of a sudden we get emotional about a topic, and if we're not careful, it's very easy to get emotionally hijacked, right? I think I've disclosed in some of my other videos that I was actually having a text conversation with my sister this week about the fact that I have the emotional range of a tic tac, and my executive coach told me that one time. And I will say, and what I mean by that is generally I feel like I'm okay, right? I would usually not say that I'm happy. I would usually just say I'm okay. I'm in the middle there, but I will say the emotion that is most common for me would be anger, and I can get angry in a heartbeat, as my wife and kids can attest. But nevertheless, what I will say is, first thing I would say about anger is one of the things I've learned, and this has nothing to do with the script, and I'll get to that here in a minute. But one of the things I've learned to do is to analyze my anger. Right. So as a male in present society and where I grew up and how I grew up, oftentimes, it was frowned upon for men to experience or boys to experience and really didn't have the words to describe or even know how to process anything but anger. If you dial back on anger is usually the result of one of three things. It's a result of fear. It's a result of frustration, and it's a result of hurt. And so oftentimes, at least boys of my generation, men of my generation, typically respond in anger when something makes them afraid, when something makes them frustrated, or something hurts them. Because at least I will say, in my upbringing, in the environment that I grew up in, it was not acceptable for a boy or a man to say that they were afraid. It wasn't acceptable for them to say that they were frustrated, and it certainly was not acceptable for them to say that they were hurt. So the first thing that I would say is, just aside from the script, if anger is your natural response, is to step back, and I've learned to do this over time. And I guess you could say this is a little bit of a script. But when I start to feel myself getting angry, when I haven't flown off the handle beforehand, before I stop to think about it, is, I stop and ask myself, okay, what's making me afraid? What's frustrating me, and what's hurting me? And oftentimes then I can get to the root of where that anger is coming from, because at least in my mind, I kind of see my anger as a secondary emotion. It's not the root cause. It's a byproduct of being fearful, of being frustrated, or being hurt. So that's number one. And I guess you could say that's a little bit of a script, even though it's just simply one question. But the larger script that I want to talk about here are questions of keeping yourself from getting emotionally hijacked. And this, again, came from a video by Tom Henschel. It's part of a larger conversation. And I'll put the link to this in the show notes out of courtesy to him, because I'm not the originator of this. But it does wrap around a prior, I can't remember I think I've talked about emotional intelligence. I think one of my early videos talked about emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence is basically this X factor that makes leaders kind of stand out. And essentially, emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize emotions in yourself, be able to regulate those emotions in yourself, recognizing emotions in a group setting, and then recognizing how those emotions may play out or affect the group dynamic. So really, this script that I'm getting ready to describe is about self-management. Or self-recognition, right? So the questions are things that you could stop and ask yourself when you feel yourself getting emotionally hijacked, right? That is when you kind of kick out of the logical brain and kick into the emotional brain, and it kind of takes over. So the first question is asking yourself, what am I really upset about? And that's kind of goes back to where I was talking about, what am I afraid of? What am I frustrated by? What is hurting me? That's kind of my process that's related to this question of what am I really upset about? So in a situation, when you feel yourself starting to get emotional about a situation, angry about a situation, kind of tense about a situation, the very first thing is to kind of kick in the script inside of your mind of what am I really upset about? That's number one. Number two would be asking, why does it matter? Why does this thing matter to me? And trying to analyze, because that'll also help you get to the root of, where you're getting emotionally hijacked and why. Then oftentimes when we get emotionally hijacked, sometimes it's in conversation with other people. A lot of times it's in conversation with other people. And so when you're thinking about how to respond in a particular situation, before you respond, asking yourself, how might what I'm about to say sound to the other person? Right? So trying to put yourself in their shoes, hearing it from their frame of mind, because a lot of times I think I would say, as a capital I introvert, oftentimes I have thought about something 10 times before I say it, usually, except when I get emotionally hijacked. When I get emotionally hijacked, when I get angry, things will come out of my mouth, and you can't recover them once they come out. It's kind of like throwing a plate across the room, watching it break, and then gluing it back together and expecting it for it to be the exact same way it was before it broke. It doesn't work that way. It's changed, it's different, it's affected. But nevertheless, thinking about how this might sound to another person. Now, oftentimes when I'm in conflict with someone and I'm thinking about going and having a conversation with them, this is kind of a key question to me, is thinking through what I might say. Now, obviously, you can think all day long about a particular dialogue or how something's going to play out, and you never know how it's going to play out until you're actually in it, because human beings, just have that capability of surprising you. But nevertheless, how might it sound to the other person? Number three. Number four, what might their side of it be? Again, trying to put yourself in the shoes of the other person to think about how they might be seeing the situation, and that kind of thing. Then the last one would be, what do I want to get by bringing it up? So what is the outcome? What do I want? A lot of times I think, we don't necessarily do a very good job of acknowledging what we want. If we go back to like the coaching habit, right? When you're asking someone else, what do you want? I think that was question number 5, maybe 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there. Same thing here is, what do you want by bringing it up? And oftentimes Oftentimes, I've been asked by people, it's like, should I address this situation? Should I acknowledge this? Should I deal with this? And even if it's caused an emotional response in yourself, even if it's something that is important to you and those kinds of things, I would also come back and ask, is it going to do good? Is it going to create some positive effect by even bringing it up at all? Because sometimes we want to bring things up just to get justification, to get even's not the right word, but to vindicate ourselves. And if that's our purpose, then we really have to step back and question, our motive there. If it's to make the relationship better, if it's to make the situation better, those kinds of things, then quite possibly it's worth addressing. So these are questions to keep from getting emotionally hijacked. What am I really upset about? Why does it matter? How does this sound to the other person? What might their side of it be? And lastly, what do I want to get by bringing it up? So again, this is, as I said, seems that everything I'm reading and seeing and listening to is getting filtered through my script meter. And so this is another one that I thought, and even though this is not a script in interacting with other people, to me, it is kind of the preparatory work before you would engage with someone to deal with, whether it be an interpersonal situation or whether it be a professional situation or whatever. I think this script can help you walk through and make sure that you approach conflict in a proper way. And more importantly, I think it keeps you from getting emotionally hijacked in the midst of that situation. So with that, I hope you continue to find these videos helpful. This may be our last week on scripts. I may find another script between now and next week. I don't know. I'm kind of taking this as it comes, as life, God, the universe, whatever you want to call it, kind of puts upon my heart what to share. That's kind of what I'm using as a guide when I create these videos. So nevertheless, as summer seems to be upon us, as I'm recording this, I hope you're moving into summer in a positive way. For my graduate student friends, we've just closed out graduation in most environments, so congratulations again to those who are moving on. Those who are going to be returning again, take a little bit. I would encourage you to find some time over the summer to take a little bit of break, and whether you're a graduate student or not, creating time with family and friends is a critical thing to do, particularly in the summertime. I think we are more attentive to that, because at the end of the day, I'm not so sure that, on our deathbed that we're going to be remembering, I wish I would have done that extra project, or I wish I would have done this extra thing. It's really going to be the relationships and the experiences, I think, that are the most memorable. So with that, I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.